including Poland, Finland, and the Baltic states. However, Hitler's lust for superiority and rule over other nations caused him to renege on this deal. Most historians agree that it was Hitler's decision for his country to fight on this additional Eastern front, along with his delay in attempting to take over Britain, that lost him the war. The war in Europe ended on the 8th of May 1945, which we now call VE Day, for Victory in Europe, when the Allies had successfully invaded Germany, captured Berlin, and accepted Germany's unconditional surrender. Japan surrendered on the 15th of August that same year, after the Americans dropped atomic bombs on 2 of their cities. This date is known as VJ Day in the United Kingdom, Victory over Japan, although it is celebrated on the 2nd of September in the U.S., as that was the date the surrender was officially signed. Chapter 2. Key Figures in the War. Adolf Hitler, 1889 to 1945. Head of the Nazi Party who led his country into the most damaging conflict the world has ever seen. Committed suicide in his bunker in Berlin. Winston Churchill, 1874 to 1965. Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for most of the war. He was voted as the greatest Briton of all time in 2002. Joseph Stalin, 1878 to 1953. Leader of the Soviet Union, successfully defending his country against German invasion and overseeing its growth into a world superpower in the early post-war years. Benito Mussolini, 1883 to 1945. Dictator of Italy, known as Il Duce, meaning the leader, who was voted out in 1943 after the Allies invaded his country. He was imprisoned by the Italian king, but later rescued by the Germans. Realizing in 1945 that the Axis would soon lose the war, he attempted to flee north, but was caught and executed by Italian partisans. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1882 to 1945. President of the United States of America when they joined the war 2 years after the fighting began. He originally wanted the country to remain officially neutral in the conflict. General Hideki Tojo, 1884 to 1948. Prime Minister of Japan for most of the war. Tojo was directly responsible for his country's infamous attack on Pearl Harbor. He was hanged on the 23rd of December, 1948, for crimes against humanity. Harry Truman, 1884 to 1972. American president who took over after the death in office of FDR. Truman authorized the use of nuclear weapons against Japan, effectively signing the death warrant of around 250,000 civilians. Some argue this prevented more deaths in the long run, whereas others say it was unnecessary. Hermann Göring, 1893 to 1946. Senior figure in the Nazi Party and head of the German Luftwaffe, their air force. He was arrested at the end of the war and sentenced to death for his crimes, but killed himself by taking cyanide the night before his planned execution. Heinrich Himmler, 1900 to 1945. Head of the SS who was obsessed with racial purity, overseeing the mass genocide of millions of non-Aryans. He committed suicide after being captured by the Allies in 1945. Joseph Goebbels, 1897 to 1945. Key figure of the Nazi propaganda machine, who showed no morals in convincing the country's people to believe in his party's aim of world domination. When he realized defeat was imminent, he, along with his wife, killed his 6 children before committing suicide, her by poison and him with a gun. Chapter 3. General Facts. As a result of the cost of the war, Europe lost its foothold as the center of world power. This led to the rise of the U.S., to whom the Allies paid a huge amount of money for joining the war, and the Soviet Union.